I'm Kathy. I'm the owner of Stitch the Word. I'm excited to teach you the basics of hand embroidery today. We're going to stitch this project together from start to finish. And if you have any questions that I haven't answered, please feel free to reach out to me on social media or via email. I hope that today this will be like learning a new song. You'll have another way to worship our Creator. And I pray that this would encourage you in your walk with Jesus as we stitch the Word together.
If your hoop is not already set up, we're going to take the project front piece and we're going to put it on this piece of backing fabric. The reason we stitch on two pieces of fabric is to give our piece a little bit more stability, but also it's going to help to hide all of our stitches on the back side that aren't quite as pretty. So we're going to just put the hoop on like that. We're going to tighten it up a little bit. And you want to give it just a little tug all the way around. If you need help tightening from an adult, absolutely ask for one, because you really do need it pretty good and tight. We want it to sound like a drum. That tells us it's tight. Now, one important thing when we hold our piece, we don't want to hold it where we're pushing on the fabric. We want to hold it over here. So you want to put your thumb resting on this part of the wood. And then on the back, we're going to use our pointer finger on this part of the wood. So we're kind of pinching like this. And then if you want to come down with your hands, again, you're not putting your fingers on the fabric, just holding the hoop. If we put our fingers on the fabric, it's gonna make it loose and it's gonna warp and it won't look quite as pretty. All right, we're gonna start with our yellow thread and we're gonna unwind it. We want a piece that goes from about your nose to the end of your fingers. So you can put this piece on your nose and stretch this out to the tip of your fingers. And once you're there, that's as much as you want to use. We don't want a super long piece because it can actually tangle up on us. We're going to start by threading our needle. I do bite my thread, so I put my thread in my mouth and I just run it between my teeth so that it makes all of the threads nice and flat. And then it's a lot easier to go in through there. Now, you want to pull this tail so that it doesn't come undone. And then at the other end, we're going to tie a knot. So you're just going to do like that and pull through. And then you just kind of want to nudge that knot as close to the end as possible. Okay, now let me show you the strategy for this sun. We're going to start here and we're going to go around the bottom. Then we're going to jump over to the middle and we're going to go back this way on the middle. Then we're going to jump over to the outside and we're going to go all the way back this way. Then we're going to jump over to the rays and we're going to go out and then jump and go in and jump and go out. And we're going to do that all the way back around. Okay? So we're going to start right here. We're going to put our needle in at the very end of that first row. And for this one, we're going to make a forward stitch. So our first stitch is forward. We're going to go down. And that's about the amount you want for one stitch. Okay. We do want to try to keep our stitches pretty similar in size. So now we're going to take the same length and jump ahead. But we always want to come in from the back of the fabric. So if our needle is on the back side, we're going to come up through the fabric. So I'm going to come up just about that 1 stitch length, pull my thread through, and then I'm going to go back to that same hole where I put the thread through last time, and I'm going to poke my needle right there into that same hole and pull through. And then I'm going to come up 1 stitch length, pull through, and then I'm going to go back down through the same hole. This is called the back stitch, and that's because we go forward, but then we actually make the stitch backwards. Just like that, sharing that hole. And then make that last little stitch. And that one may have been a little bigger than my other ones, but it's okay. All right, then we're going to jump over here to the end, and we're going to do 1 forward stitch. And then we're going to come up 1 stitch length away. Oops, I made a knot. Let's see. Let's pull it. There we go. And go back down right there. Then we're going to go forward and back down. Forward. You see, we're always jumping about the same length ahead when we make our stitches. And it is a trick trying to figure out where your needle's going to come up, but you can just kind of lightly poke and see where your needle is. And I promise you that the more you do this, the better you'll get at guessing closer the first time, because you begin to learn and feel where your needle is. And we just want to make sure we stay on that line and that our needle is coming up on the line. Okay, and that last stitch is going to be just a little bit smaller than the rest, but that's okay. All right, now we're ready to jump over here. And we're going to do this 3rd row the same way. As you're coming up and down, you always want to keep your fingers, you want to keep your fingers right there, because if you pull and you don't have your fingers holding the thread, your thread's going to come out every time. So it's really important to hold your needle and hold. Can you see how I'm using this finger? So I'm pinching up here, but I'm using this middle finger to kind of keep the thread stable. So I pull it through, and then I'm kind of using it like a doorstop. All right. So now we're going to jump over to these rays, and each of these rays is just 1 stitch. So we call that a straight stitch. So we're going to go from one end to the other and down, and then come up, holding that needle. You can either do this, or you can even pinch between your fingers so that you're holding on to that thread, because I know that can be one of the most frustrating things, is if your needle keeps getting unthreaded. All right, so we're going to come up on this end and then back down, and then come up here and down. And we're just going to do that all the way across. My thread is getting kind of short, so I'm going to go ahead and stop with this piece of thread, and I want to show you how to tie it off. So you pull your needle off, and I always put my needle on a little bit of fabric just so I don't lose it. And you see this has 6 strands in this floss. So we are using all 6 of them. But what I want you to do is to separate this 3 and 3. Okay? So I've got 3 on this side, 3 on this side, and I'm going to pull them apart. And now I'm going to tie a knot just like shoelaces. So I'm going to go under and pull and under and pull. And I do make 2 knots. All right, then we're going to trim it. Okay, so there's your sun. Okay, so next for our green, we're going to do the letters for he is. We're still going to use a back stitch. We're going to make these letters 3 stitches high. So when I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to imagine cutting this into 3 pieces, and that's where I'm going to put my needle back down. So I'm going to go down about 1/3 of the way, and then I'm going to come up at about 2/3, back down, and then I'm going to come up at the bottom. And just keeping your stitches about the same length will help to make it look a little bit neater. Okay, I'm going to just use 1 stitch to come across from one side to the other. And then I'm going to do the same thing, putting 3 stitches in on the right hand side. For our E, same thing. We're going to go 1 stitch across, and then we're going to make 3 stitches down. So I'm coming up about 1/3 of the way, then 2/3 of the way down, and then the end. Then I'm going to finish off the middle of the E and the end. And it is much easier if you come up where there's not thread than trying to come up in the thread. All right, we're going to do the same thing with our I. We're going to go down 1/3 of the way, and 2/3, and look, my thread's trying to come out, so I'm going to pull it a little longer. Okay, and for our S, we may have to make some slightly smaller stitches, but you just want to keep following the curve. Probably 2 more little stitches. And there we go. Okay, next up we're going to do our pink. We're going to start at the very tip of this R. We're going to bring our needle up. And we're going to do the same thing with going about 1 stitch length. So we're going to use about the same stitch length as our sunshine. And we're going to follow these letters. So it's just like tracing, but with thread. And each time we're going to jump ahead 1 stitch length, come up on the line, and then take our needle back down through the same hole as the previous stitch. Now, sometimes on these curves, you may need to use a slightly smaller stitch, just like we did on the S. There we go. Now on the I, we're going to go straight up. 2 stitches should be plenty for that I. Okay. And then we're going to make 1 little stitch right here. So I'm just going to come up near that dot, and then I'm just going to make, I'll show you about how big, just about that big. Take my needle back down, and there we go. Then I'm going to come back to right here and rejoin my letters. So I'm going to bring that up to that I, and then I'm going to keep moving along. And we're going to tie this off and use a separate piece of thread or floss for the dots. Okay, last up is our dots. And this is purely optional. If you don't want the dots, your project is great without it. You can take the hairdryer to it at this point, but I'm going to show you how we make these little dots. We're going to make them the same way we made this eye, with just a little stitch. So almost coming up on one side of the dot and then kind of back down on the other side. So it's just a little, just a very small stitch. If you know how to do a French knot, that would look beautiful on this too. But I like the way these tiny stitches look like dots. There you go. We're all done. I'm going to show you what the hairdryer does next. So when you're all done, you can take the blow dryer or ask an adult to help you. If you do not have a blow dryer, you can iron this on the back side. But I want you to watch the magic. All those lines disappeared. Isn't that cool? So even if you weren't perfectly on the line, nobody will ever be able to tell. Okay, to finish this off, we are going to take this out of the hoop. You're going to add this piece of backing fabric. So lay it down and lay your project on top of it. Now is the time to make sure your project is nice and centered on the hoop. So you're going to lay it over and think about this like a frame. So we want to make sure it's centered. Let's see. Pull it down just a smidge. There we go. And then we're going to tighten it up. And then you are going to make sure that everything is nice and smooth and that it's just like you want it. Well, mine might be a little off center. So at this point, you should ask an adult to help you to cut this because you really need some good sharp scissors. You're just going to take your scissors and first I kind of give it a trim. Now, there are lots of ways to finish a project. And if you want to hop on YouTube, you'll see some different ones. So if you want to check those out before you cut, you may want to do that. I prefer this because honestly, it is the simplest and it doesn't require anything extra like a hot glue gun. But there are different ways, and you could back this with felt. I'll let you check that out. And also for me, I typically do not plan to take my projects back out of a hoop. So I consider this like a picture frame, and I will just leave it in that. Okay. Now, if you want to take a little marker or Sharpie, and you can put the date back here, you could put a Bible verse, or even like a to and from if you want to give this as a gift. Okay, so your project kit came with a piece of ribbon, and I'm going to show you how I make that into a hanger. So I fold the piece of ribbon in half to make a little loop, and then I put the loop through the front, and you can make it as tall or as short as you want it. And then on the back, I split those two and I bring them back around and tie a knot in the front. And then a bow. You could, of course, leave it as a knot if you want to do that. You could just tie a bow. You can leave it off altogether. There we go. And I would just trim these to the length that you want, and then it can be hung. You can also put these in a small easel. They actually sell them at the Dollar Tree with little tiny canvases.